Hey guys, Queen's Gambit is a really strong opening for white. In this video, I'm gonna show you what you need to know to play this famous variation. We'll see the three main systems black can play against it. I wanna show you some opening ideas, but also we see beautiful classic games as examples of how could the game continue in the middle game, so you really were prepared to play and win with Queen's Gambit. In the end, one nice blitz game I played with a good combination to finish the attack. Let's get into it. So we have Queen's Gambit on the board after d4, d5 and c4. The idea of move number 2 c4 is that we are trying to deflect black's central pawn so we can get a pawn majority in the center, and sometimes or eventually we could be playing e4. So when we play Queen's Gambit, black can try three main systems. They can protect the central pawn with the e pawn, and this is Queen's Gambit declined. They can protect the central pawn with the c pawn, and this is Slav Defense. Or they can just accept the gambit, and this is Queen's Gambit accepted. Observe that other ways to defend the central pawn are not really good. For example, knight f6 is a very common mistake in this position, but this is very dubious. In this position we can just take on d5. And notice black cannot recapture here with a pawn. That's not good. So if they capture here with the queen, we can play knight c3, developing, getting a tempo. And if they capture with a knight, we are playing e4. Again, we are developing, we are getting a tempo, we are getting the center. So this position is going to be really good. So let's see how to play against Queen's Gambit declined e6. Here we are going to play a very natural development, like the knight is going to go to c3, the bishop is going to be pinning on g5, the knight on the king side goes to f3, usually the queen goes to c2, the bishop to d3, very often the rook goes to c1 because this c file is very likely to be half open early in the game. So for example, here we're going to play knight c3, black can try here knight f6, we can play bishop g5, a normal move here is knight d7 for example, and this move is actually also creating a trap. Observe that in this position, as there is a pin, the knight is not really defending the pawn on d5, so we are attacking twice, but we shouldn't really capture that pawn. For example, if we take and we get the pawn, we might think we are winning, but actually is the opposite. Black can capture the knight. I think they call this trap the elephant trap. And if we capture the queen, they check. They take our queen because that's the only move we can play, and then they take the bishop. As you can see, black has a piece up here in this line. So you know, after this knight d7 in this position, we shouldn't capture that pawn. We shouldn't fall for this. And also I want to highlight something about the trade on d5 with our c pawn. In general, we shouldn't rush with this move because observe the bishop is behind the chain of pawns, so once you trade, you are opening the line for the bishop. So it's not a mistake, it's very playable. It's actually a theoretical variation, it's the exchange variation. But well, in general, it's going to be annoying for black if we keep the pawns there. Usually when we are going to develop the bishop, it's a good moment, instead of developing directly, to trade. So that's like the main rule I follow in these positions. Well, e3 for example is a normal move here. Let's say black plays bishop e7, we can play knight f3, black castles, queen c2 is a normal move here. And just to show you what can happen in these positions, let's say black plays c6, we can trade and develop the bishop on d3. And this pawn structure we have on the board is what they call Carlsbad. This is a very common pawn structure. It happens in many important openings. In this position, we can play, for example, let's say black plays rook e8 with castle, and there are some plans for white here. One of the most popular plans is to play on the queen side. Observe we have two pawns, so we have a minority over here, and with these two pawns we can attack. And the idea is that we want to create some weaknesses with these two pawns, like we want to disconnect pawns. So we want to break on b5, trade here on c6 for example, and if that happens, there will be a backward pawn here on c6. Also, if we play b5 and they trade, there will be an isolated pawn on d5. So that's the idea of this minority attack. Usually when we can play b5 and disconnect the pawns, we can base our middle game strategy on attacking the weaknesses we created with the minority attack. Also, another very common way to play in these positions is to try to play some e4. So sometimes we can try some f3 e4. Of course, we need to move the knight to d2 or sometimes to e5. and the rook, instead of going to b1, can go to e1, and then we are breaking. Those are the two main ideas we can use in this Carlsbad structure if we get something like this in a Queen's Gambit declined. Let's see what happened in this game by Frank Marshall. In this position against Queen's Gambit declined, he just played knight c3, knight f6, then knight f3, bishop e7, very natural development, bishop g5 as we saw in the analysis, knight d7, and then e3. In this position, black can castle, and we can play here rook c1. This file, as I said earlier, is very likely to be open in these positions after some trade, so the rook on c1 is going to be very well. Black can play here b6, and in this position Marshall played c takes d5, e takes d5, and in this position there is a special move. Actually, something normal here is bishop d3 and continue our development, and we can castle. And actually Marshall played here something different. He's going to play queen a4. He has a very nice idea. He wants to play bishop a6 in only one move, because if we develop the bishop to d3 and we play queen e2 or queen a4, we can continue with that idea later, but we are playing this in two moves. So he wants to play that in only one bishop move, and that's why he's playing queen a4 first. And this plan is going to be important because, for example, black played bishop b7 in this position, and the idea is that if we can trade the bishop of this fianchetto, we are going to create weaknesses on light squares on the queen side. Observe the pawns are in dark squares, so the bishop is a good defender over there. If the bishop is not there, all these squares are going to be weak, and we can use them with our queen, with our knight, with our rook. So that's the plan. It's a strong strategical plan for these positions when our opponent develops the bishop on the fianchetto on the queen side. He continued bishop a6, as you can imagine. Bishop takes a6, queen takes a6, and black played c6. Marshall castled, and there is this dubious, or actually a mistake, knight e4. And at this point, Marshall found a really nice continuation. He just played bishop takes e7, queen takes e7, and observe the pawn structure on the queen side. Notice there is a weakness here on c6. So what he's going to do is just attack the weakness, attack the weakest spot on black's structure on the queen side. So he's playing here queen b7. It's also pinning the knight over there, but the main idea is to attack the pawn on c6. Black played rook fc8. Black thought, well, I'm fine, I'm just defending with my rook, so there's nothing in this position. However, there is a tactic move Marshall found. I will explain it right now, but if you want, pause the video and try to find this move he played. In this position, Frank Marshall played knight takes d5. And the idea is that there is a lot of pressure here on c8, so there is like a pin. If the pawn captures, the rook is hanging. Black plays queen d6, and there is another move just to finish the game. Black resigned after this move. I will say it, but again, it could be a really good tactic training if you try to find it. Marshall played here rook takes c6, and the rook is hanging, the knight is hanging, but black cannot really capture either of them, because, for example, if the rook takes, we have many ideas. One of them is to capture that rook hanging on a8, but also there are ideas with queen takes rook, following with knight e7, getting the queen back. So the capture of the rook is not really going to work, but also the capture of the knight is a mistake, since the queen is going to be on the same line as our queen, so we can discover, and we are getting the unprotected queen on d5. So let's see it on the board. After queen takes knight, rook takes, and queen takes queen is probably the best move we can play here. The other system is when black defends with the c pawn. This is a Slav defense. As you can see, something good about this move is that black is not blocking the light square's bishop, so it can be developed outside the chain of pawns. The drawback with this move is that black is not really developing when they play c6, so they are wasting the turn, as it happens when black plays c6, where they are actually improving. They are trying to develop the dark square's bishop. So in these positions, we are going to continue again with a normal development. We can play here knight f3, and usually black plays here knight f6, that's the main line. And well, we have many options when our opponent plays Slav Defense. For example, we can play exchange variation. These positions are very quiet and not very entertaining, but if you like that kind of solid quiet positions, it's going to be okay. Also, there are options with queen c2, queen b3, so there are some ways to play against Slav, but the main line and probably one of the best moves here is going to be knight c3. Also, e3 is an interesting option. So knight c3, and again black can try some things, like for example they can play semi-Slav, and the idea is that they are in a very solid position here. They have a very solid pawn structure, but again the bishop is inside the chain of pawns. So these positions sometimes are similar to Queen's Gambit declined, and sometimes are a little different, but well, the idea is that we are going to develop our pieces very naturally, like e3, bishop d3, we are going to castle. The other bishop can be developed over b2 if we want. This bishop can also be developed outside the chain of pawns, and these lines are a little more complicated but also very interesting. So let's get into the main line when black actually plays here d takes c4. That's the most common move here in Slav Defense. As black pawn is on c6, they are playing b5 very easily in these positions, protecting the pawn on c4. We are playing a gambit, but this does not mean we don't want to get that pawn back in the middle game. So the right move in this position is going to be a4 to avoid b5. Usually black plays here bishop f5 just to put the bishop outside and then continue with e6. And here we have some options. I really like e3 here. We are going to see a master's game where white played knight e5 is also a very good option because we are getting the pawn back very soon. So e3 is very simple, and if black plays e6, we can take the pawn on c4. This position is really nice, it's very playable. We are controlling the center, so in general we will have a very small advantage in the middle game. We can castle. Usually this queen goes to e2, so we are pushing in the center, but also we are clearing d1 for our rook. Observe the queen is on d8, so we are avoiding moves like c5 or e5 when we put the rook there on the same line. I found this really nice classic game where they played a Queen's Gambit Slav variation, and it continued like this: knight f3, knight f6, knight c3, exactly as we studied. They take c4 and then a4. After bishop f5, I suggested e3, but also we said knight e5 was a line, so that's the move white is playing this time. And that is that we're getting the pawn back very soon. And also sometimes we can play f3 and e4, getting a really nice center with that plan. This time black is playing c5 here, which is not that strong. A normal move or a better move is knight b d7 here. So after c5, there is a really nice move from white. He's playing e4 here, and there is that he's getting the pawn on c4 with a checkmate threat, but also when we play e4, we're clearing the line for the queen. So once we play queen f3, we could be threatening many things, like the knight here on e4 if black takes there, the bishop on f5, there is a mate behind, and also there is b7 over there. So this move e4 is very aggressive and is very interesting. Black played knight takes e4, they just accepted the pawn, but let me show you. If black takes on d4 trying to get our knight, this is not going to work, because then we take the bishop, and if they take the knight we trade queens, and then we have a fork here on f7 getting the rook. So after e4 they don't have too many options in the game. Knight takes e4 was played, but then as we mentioned, queen f3, many threats over there and a lot of pressure. C takes d4 now, but then queen takes bishop, it's threatening checkmate, it's threatening the knight again. So knight d6 was played in this position, but the master as white found this nice idea. Bishop takes c4. He just ignored the threat on the queen on f5, and there is a checkmate threat here. So after knight takes queen, we have bishop takes f7. That's checkmate. That's why in the game black played e6, but then the knight cannot really capture here, so we can play bishop b5 check. And this is really strong. Observe that black cannot really block here because we are playing queen f3, and then we are attacking here 3 times. So we are definitely getting something there, and we continue with the attack. So that's why black tried king e7 here, but well, now we have a forced win, a forced mate in 3 moves. You can try to find it. I will say it right now. In this position, white played knight g6, and the idea is that we want to clear this square because we could be mating over there with the queen. After h takes g6, then we're going to deflect this pawn with knight d5, and once black captures, then queen e5 is going to be checkmate. And the other popular system black can try against queen's gambit is just accept the gambit, like d takes c4, and this is queen's gambit accepted. Here we have some options. For example, knight f3 is very well, e4 is very well. My favorite line in this position is actually e3. The idea is that when we play e3, we are getting the pawn back almost for sure. I mean, no matter what black plays, we are going to get that pawn back. Also, when we play e3, we won't have problems with our central pawn on d4, because in other lines, black will try c5, e5, knight c6, so they will put a lot of pressure here, and it's not so easy to play. I mean, it's good, it's strong, but you need to know the line very well. A normal move for black here is something like knight f6, but let me show you first what can happen if they try to defend the pawn on c4. So, for example, if they play b5, we are gonna play a4, and this is a very typical move in these positions to try to disconnect these pawns. If they are disconnected, if they are isolated, they are very weak, and we can capture them. So a4, and observe a6 is not working because we capture and there is a pin, the rook is hanging on a8. So maybe they can try c6, but this is actually another mistake. Here we capture on b5, and if they recapture, that's the final mistake. Here we are getting a lot of material up. There is a famous trap here. Observe the weakness on this diagonal, and the rook is very exposed there. So we can just play queen f3 here, and this is going to create a big problem for black. Maybe they can sacrifice the knight so they don't lose the rook. So we capture and they block. But well, as you can imagine, this position is decisive advantage for white. Also, after e3, if they try something like bishop e6, which is already very dubious because it's blocking the pawn and they want to, of course, develop the bishop. Here we can continue knight d2, and again a lot of pressure here on c4, and we are getting that pawn back anyway. So as I was saying, knight f6 is main line here, and we're going to capture the pawn. Black is playing e6, we are playing knight f3. They can put some pressure in our center, we can castle. They can play a6, wanted to expand a little on the queen side, and well, there are some ways to play, but probably queen e2 is very well. Again, we're putting the queen on a very nice file, but also clearing d1 to cover our central pawn on d4. So this position is very well. White is going to be slightly better, sometimes equal middle game, but it's a really nice position. The knight is going to be developed over c3. If there is a trade, this bishop can be developed over this diagonal. If not, sometimes we can develop the bishop over the great diagonal. There is a game by Janowksy where he played knight f3, another main line. Actually, he's going to play e3 very soon. So after c5, putting pressure in the center, he played e3, and this is similar to the line we were suggesting. C takes d4, e takes d4, and after bishop g4, which is probably a little dubious, because there would be many tactics. Once we capture the pawn on c4, there are some ideas with the bishop hanging, for example, like bishop takes f7 and knight e5. So it's like too early for this pin. Black played here e6, and then this move queen a4, moving the queen away from the pin, but also releasing the knight, so he could be playing knight e5 now that there is no pin. So knight c6 was played, and then knight e5, putting a lot of pressure here. Queen takes d4, accepting the challenge. This is going to be pretty complicated in the next moves, because the queen is also creating problems like attacking, like checking, mating if the queen moves. Knight takes c6, queen e4, we can develop and block the check at the same time. B takes c6, we develop and we get a tempo. And after queen takes g2, Janowksy found a really special move in this position. Pause the video if you want to find it. I'm gonna say it right now. In this position, Janowksy found this great idea. The queen is defending the pawn, so he just interfered that queen by playing bishop d5. The idea is that once he captures here, he's gonna get a lot of material, but also the king is going to be very unsafe, moving all over the board. So bishop d5 is very strong. E takes d5 and then queen takes e6. After king d8, we can capture here with check, but observe that king e7 was not better, since we can capture here with check. Now the knight is more active, now we captured the pawn. And after king d8, we can capture the rook with check again. So that's why after this check, they just played king here, we capture the rook with check, king goes to d7, queen b7 check, the king goes up, the position is hard whatever black plays here, and Janowksy played queen c6. After bishop d6, white is winning in many ways, but the way Janowksy finished this game is really interesting. In this position, he played bishop f4, and observe that he's losing 2 rooks when he plays that move, because black can capture here with check and then capture the other rook. However, this move is threatening checkmate e3. So after bishop f4, there's a lot of pressure here. This is just winning the game. Black resigned. Let's see what can happen if black accepts the 2 rooks. So queen takes, king d2, queen takes, and then the mate in 3 is queen takes d6, queen e5, and queen g5 checkmate. Okay, well, let's see if we have a queen's gambit here. Let's see if we are lucky. Okay, perfect. Queen's gambit, and then Slav. Okay, so knight f3 is the move we play in this position, and then knight c3, d takes e4 is main line, but he's playing queen b6. Well, that's a little weird, right? I mean, the queen b6 is not. However, there's nothing wrong, I think, with this move. I'm just going to continue with my development. The queen doesn't make too much sense on b6, as long as I have d4 and b2 very well protected. Okay, knight takes pawn. Okay, so we continue our development. He lost his central pawn, that should be good for us. So we are slightly better here, I guess. At some point I need to play e4, probably after some queen e2. So my bishop has some more perspectives. Also my queen is guarding b2 right now. And I think this is a good moment to play e4. And then bishop f4 looks really good on this diagonal. Also, I'm planning rook b1 now. Getting the pawn on b7, because the queen will have to move away from that pawn. Okay, queen b8, he saw the threat, but rook b8 is still a good idea, right? I mean, rook b1 is still fine here. He should play b5. Okay, queen c8. Let's play queen e3 so we can move our knight. He should try knight d7 now, because I'm threatening knight e5 is one of my ideas when I move with the queen. Well, now this position with the 2 bishops is really nice for white. Let's put the queen with some ideas on e6. I think he should try knight b6, guarding e6 with the queen and blocking the file. Well, he plays b5. I don't think that's so strong. Okay, well, there are some ideas with a7, but if I play e5, he's just playing g6 here, so he's defending more or less fine. So I'm just going to play bishop e3 and try to use the f file. He plays very fast. That's something good for him. I mean, he's a really fast player. Okay, let's break over here. Let's open some lines. I have 2 bishops, I have a rook, so I need to break and open lines. Let's see what happens after this. With the rook should be fine. Probably knight f6 is a move here. Okay, g6, is that a good move? I mean, rook takes pawn. What happens here? I'm winning, right? Rook takes pawn. I'm winning. Yeah, this is winning, right? Rook takes pawn, and there should be. I mean, they can escape over here, but I have the feeling I can get a lot of things, even when the king tries to escape. If the king comes back down, I have bishop a6. Oh, he plays. Okay, he plays this. Well, I don't have too much time, so I will try to keep queens on the board and try to win by attack. But, well, it's not so easy. I mean, he's defending more or less fine there. I need to defend that. Okay, I know I'm losing this pawn, but I don't have time to think, and I think I need to play something. I have some ideas here with rook g7. So I thought this was going to be fine. Okay, so rook here. If he takes the bishop, I have mate, so I don't think he should take it. Okay, this is mate in 4, right? Yeah, he fell for that, so now he received mate in 4 moves. A nice mate in 4. But it was very complicated. I mean, only 15 seconds if he doesn't fall for a mate. I mean, after king takes rook, we have queen check and queen mate. That's the idea. So let me show the idea again. So he takes the bishop, check, and then we attract the king, so we can play check and mate. If you guys have any question, let me know in the comments. If you want to see the 5 best chess opening traps, they work almost always. Check out this interesting video. I'm sure you will enjoy it. Thank you guys, like, subscribe. See you on the next.